Busy?
Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name's Darren, I'm an addict.
Darren.
I want to thank the committee for asking me to share my experience Stenton Hope here tonight at the banquet chair that's down as. Where's the food? And I was nervous because I was thinking about, you know, sitting there eating food and all the time it takes to eat the food and the nerves that I've got, or I'll have. And then I've got to get up here, so I'm quite glad that there's no food. But yeah, I want to thank the committee and what you said, Mark. You know, it touched me then. And I want to welcome any newcomers. I want to welcome anyone that's trying to get clean with a desire. Anyone that's clean and suffering, and anyone that's back from a relapse. I want to really welcome them. My experience then to hope is, you know, I don't even know what's going to come out of my mouth, how it's going to come out, but all I've got is my story. And if you didn't use the same drugs as I shared about, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that we've got a common bond, which is our addiction, and we've got recovery. And I can't do it on my own. I need NA. It saved my life. So my stories, you know, my stories. Grew up in the 70s in Crocky, and it was like I don't know whether I was born with addiction, with the disease of addiction, or I don't know whether it just kind of manifested along the way. Because I remember being happy as a kid. I remember being free. I remember having a boxer bike. It was all rusted and I used to jump cans. I used to, you know what I mean, I thought it was Evel Knievel. Something, and I'd throw me foot in the back wheel and do a little skid, and you know what I mean, and get off the bike, and yeah, I just jumped 20 cans there. And you know, in a household that was like, with a lovely, loving mother, and a lovable rogue of a dad, but he was lovable, and he'd done his best that he could. So I remember being happy, you know what I mean? I do remember being happy as a kid and free. And then, you know, I'm in a neighbourhood where there's like, you know, there's the Roonies who lived on the corner. There's about 10 houses up, and they were like boxers, football fans, punks. Some of them were punks, you know what I mean? They had like skinheads and leather jackets and chains, you know what I mean? And it was all that back then. And then you had the Grafton, which was you know, if you're not from Liverpool, you should probably heard about it. It was a club for adults, but on a Sunday it was like a dance for teenagers, and I was like 9 years of age, and so I'm trying to be in with the Roonies 1 minute, and then on a Sunday night, getting in the Grafton, I'm got a two-tone shirt on, a trilby, and a corduroy jacket. Trying to be a mod. And I had two brothers who were older than me, and they were into like, so was I, you know what I mean, like Genesis and Pink Floyd, and you know, it was all Dark Side of the Moon them days, and Trick of the Tail, you know what I mean, and Abacab, all the tunes, and I'd gone to Broadway shops, and I was being about 8 or 9, and robbed the Grease album, and snuck it into our house and hid it under my mattress. And when my brothers were in the house, I put it on the record player. So I had chills that were multiplying, and I was losing control. I thought if they caught me with that, they'd fill me in. And the next thing, it's like, you know, it's like I'm trying to be in with the hard cases. I'm trying to fit in, and I didn't know what it was. It was fear, you know what I mean? I'm trying to be something that I'm not. And the drugs come along, and I started to use drugs. And I didn't use drugs and go into school and have confidence. I didn't intend to get a confidence from using them. I used them. And all of a sudden I ended up rebelling. I ended up getting expelled and suspended, and that just went on, and that went into different drugs. And I was, you know, living in Crocky back then in 1982. Heroin just imploded in the community, and you know, let's go back to like Greece. Let's go back to Starsky and Hutch, Kojak, and the streets of San Francisco. And Huggy Bear, remember Huggy Bear? Of Starsky and Hutch. Well, Huggy Bear was the man who was the dealer, and he sold the smack. And what I remember about that, when I watched it on the telly, it was purple. It was in a syringe. You injected it and you died straight away. That was my mentality. So when all my mates were all throwing in for the £5 weed or a bag of whiz or whatever it was, which were the drugs I took and I knew about at the age of 12, they said, "To be throwing for a bag?" And I said, "A bag of what?" I'd already flicked me pound over that I got off my ma. He said, "A bag of gear." I said, "What's gear?" He said, "Smack." I said, "What's smack?" He said, "Heroin." And I said, "Fuck that, I don't want to die." And out of all them lads, I was the only one that walked out of the block that night. And I went home. And I remember it was being in my head. I remember going round my brain. I remember thinking that I'm not going to be part of the gang and I'm not going to fit in if I don't. And I was curious. And he knocked her ass the next day and he said, "Are you Irene? Is Darren in?" They were always dead respectful, me mates. And I heard her saying, "I'll get him now." And I remember being angry because I knew what I was going to do. And it was a £5 bag they got the night before, and they still had half of it the next day. And I remember saying to myself, I'll have it. Well, I asked this lad, and he said, "It takes months for you to get addicted." And I remember, and I went, "How many months?" And he said, 2. And this number popped into my head: "I'll take it for 6.5 weeks, and then I'll stop." 6.5 weeks, that's what I had in my head. And I had it, and there was Jason, he's gone. There was John, there was George, these are all dead now, by the way. And there was a pram in my mates, at the bottom of my mates' hallway, the bottom of the block. And it was his niece's pram, and Jason fitted in that pram. That's how small and how young we were. And he fitted in the pram, and he was sitting in the pram, and he said, "Rocky, it's like having 10 spliffs and nothing, you feel nothing, you just don't feel your feelings, and it's like being underwater, it's boss." And I had it, and I spewed up everywhere. And I loved it, and that's the truth. I loved it. And I started, and I couldn't stop. It went on, that went on for years, you know what I mean, not being able to stop. And the people that loved me. My ma and dad, you know, like they stripped me of my clothes and they put me in a pair of shorts and a pair of flip-flops. And they put the clothes in the attic. And they tried the best. And I remember my aunt fella one night, I remember my dad, I remember him getting me, I went home, I got drugs and I went home, and I passed the drugs up to the top window to my brother, who was also on the gear. And then I knocked on the front door. My dad brought me in, strip searched me like he was a screw and bolt. Confiscated the money out of my pocket and then sent me upstairs to the room. And then he went to his room, and I'll never forget this. And I followed him to the bedroom door and I listened through the crack of the door and I heard him crying. And I heard him praying, "Please God, don't take my son." And I didn't realise about the disease of addiction. I didn't know I had a disease. I didn't know that it was me thinking. I didn't know that it was the obsession. And I got emotional listening to my dad cry. And it wasn't even for a minute. It must have lasted, I don't know how many seconds. But I heard his pain and I felt his pain. And it left me. And the obsession kicked in, and I jumped out the window and just went. Anyway, you know, that just went on until there was a time when I'd done it for my mum, I'd done it for my dad, I'd done it for my ex-partner. I didn't do it for me. And I got clean and I was abstinent, still feeling rough 3 months down the line, and I was tormented, and I didn't want to live. That's the truth. I was only a teenager, in a room full of people, in a house full of people that loved the bones of me, and I didn't want to live. So I went back, and I thought about that feeling that went on for decades now. Through jails, institutions, and not being able to stop. Well, just the fear of stopping and wanting to kill myself again. So I just thought, I don't want that feeling. So I lived to use and I used to live, and I couldn't stop. Now, fast forward the tape to 2008. Alone, living like an animal. All the drugs under the sun that we include in Narcotics Anonymous, I was taking them all. Not these new drugs that are out now. It was just all, you know, I was bevying, I was diazepam, I was injecting, I was just living like an animal, and I was on my own, and it was torture with the drugs. So at the end of the road, I felt like killing myself with the drugs, and I was desperate, and it was painful, and I was alone. I went into detox, and I got kicked out. I moved in with our Billy from the hostel, which was hell. It was the gates of hell. That was me, I nicknamed it. Everyone calls it that now. The gates of hell. It was horrible. And our Billy let me come and live with him. and I was on 80 mils of methadone, 30 mils of diazy after detox. I was drinking 4 cans of Skull Super, and I was having the odd thing here and there. And there was this lad, and he's no longer with us now, called Billy. And he rang me, he was still in the gates of hell, and he rang me to tell me, well, to offer me to come to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. But I thought Billy said, do you want to go for a walk? Because our Billy was sitting in the living room. And that to me meant, are we going to score? Because my brother wasn't on the gear. So in my mind, I thought Billy said, do you want to go for a walk? So I said, yeah, let's go for a walk. So the next thing, I'm in a meeting. I'm asleep in a meeting. It's become weird. And I woke up, and Billy's gone, and he's left me here in a meeting. And it was horrible. It was strange. People were smiling, and they were being nice, and they were happy, and they were laughing, and I was like, what's there to be happy about? Anyway, I left the meeting and I went back to our Billy's and got 4 cans of Skull Super on the way. And I sat in our Billy's in the back bedroom, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was happening there, what happened then. And I went back to the meeting a week later. And it was the same people, the same members of the group that was still being the same way that they was a week before. Welcoming me, offering me phone numbers, smiling, happy. And my mind was just trying to separate me to not want to be there because I felt worse than everyone else. Anyway, I got some literature and I took it back to our kids and I started to read it. And it said, just when I opened the book, it said, give yourself a break and read this book. It's written by addicts, for addicts. So everything that was going on in the meeting and me feeling less than and not being able to feel equal, it said it all in the basic text. It was like it was written about me, and that's where I started to identify. So and it also gives you suggestions of what an A is, and I thought I'll find the loophole in this. There's got to be one. There always was. There's always an organisation looking to get something or get you to do something for them for whatever reason that they've got behind it. Yeah, I'll find it. And I couldn't find it alongside going to the meetings. So I kept coming back, and I found that once I got involved in NA, no, I wasn't clean. Nobody said, no, you can't be a good meter and greeter. No, you can't do the tea. You can't get involved. There's the money for the tea, the coffee and the biscuits. We trust you. You're equal. You're part of this. People started to give me keys to the flats and their houses, you know what I mean? I was like, wow. And it spurred me on. I had a desire where I wanted to be clean. Now I knew from the year it took me to get a day clean why people had their families back in their lives, why people were smiling, why they were happy, why they had jobs, and why they could function and live. You know what I mean? And I wanted that, and I was inspired that if I got a sponsor, and I worked the steps that maybe I wouldn't want to kill myself this time clean. So I started going to different meetings. I took on service at a meeting on Scotty. I took anything to do with Narcotics Anonymous. I got involved in. Whatever committees there was, whatever unity days there was, whatever conventions, I went to them. You know, John was instrumental to it all as well, because he said to me, there's a spare room in ours. He said, you can come and live and get clean in my flat. It wasn't like I was reading the literature, but I wasn't really speaking to anyone about it. You know what I mean? What it kind of meant to me, you know, and we'd sit there and we'd talk about literature and about chapters in the basic text and service, and it really helped me, and how important it was to get a sponsor. Because while our minds and bodies, you know, I've still got drugs in us, this program won't work. So we need to get abstinent and we need to get a sponsor. So I was going to meetings and I was anything to do with NA. I was there. It kept me safe, kept me connected. And I went to St. Nick's meeting, and I was watching. I used to go look around, see, you know, if you can kind of connect with someone that's, you think that might help you, or you can trust, you know. Anyway, I asked. The sponsor I've still got now, and I've had for over 16 and a half years. Well, I didn't ask him. I said, can I meet up with you? And we met up, and we went for a coffee, and then we went for a walk around town, and we spoke, and we, you know what I mean, and we spoke about our lives, about our addiction. And then and I said to him, just as I was leaving, I said, would you sponsor me? And he said, it'd be an honour, but first you need to get a day clean. And I thought to myself, well, I'll see you next week. I think it was about 9 months later, I got a day clean in Narcotics Anonymous. And I was eager. I said, what do we do now? He said, take it easy, Darren. Just let the dust settle and we'll start the work. And because I really wanted what this had to offer, you know, I was eager to get stuck into the steps. And it said about what does the disease of addiction mean to me in step 1. And I wrote the questions, you know, I answered the questions and I wrote them all down, and then I remember halfway through, I think it was 40 odd questions into it, I said to him, I've done it all wrong. And he said, why? I said, can I meet up with you and explain? And we read a bit what I thought as he wrote, and I kind of realised in there then that drugs are just a symptom of the disease, because it was going into how it manifested in other areas. I couldn't stop fucking shoplifting. And he said to me, how did you get clean? I said, hey, Narcotics Anonymous. He went, no, what's this program about, Darren? I said, the steps. He went, no, it's just for today. It's just for today. Tell yourself just for today. You're not going to go in the shop and you're not going to rob someone. I went, what a guy. He knows his stuff, him. Sound. Nice one. I remember going to see our Billy, walked down from John John's, and I walked down Breck Road, and I walked in the shop, and I smoked at the time, and I said, "Can I have a half ounce of Golden Virginia there, mate?" He turns his back and just fucking fill me pockets full of polos and fucking opal fruits, and I go, fucking hell. The disease of addiction, what it means to me. Anyway, and then when I'd finished it and we started to, I remember sitting down, and I remember as we were about to read the answers out, I remember thinking, I'll skip that question. I'll actually skip that section. And every time I read a question out, I'd look up, and he'd just be nodding. He'd just be like, it was a nod to say, I get it, me too. And the trust come then, and I started not to feel so alone, and at the end of the step he said it, me too. The things that I like, what I'm talking about here, and I'm saying this for the newcomer, right, is that the fear that I had, and feeling less than and worse than, was all the things that I thought I'd done that yous probably would never have. And one of them was this. I remember reading this out. It was just for me thinking, and I thought I was taking it to the grave. I thought this was going to the grave with me. My ma, who was a lovely, lovely woman, right? She was devoted, and she'd give everything to us. Was dying in the Royal, and I was at the end of her bed, using, after getting out of prison, and the tablets were in a bag under the bed, and I couldn't stop thinking of how I was going to get them tablets, or where they were going to go. And just for thinking that, I felt like it was morally wrong just to think that. So I thought that was going to the grave with me. And I soon realised that that's me thinking. And I'm not me thinking. I didn't even get them anyway. So anyway, so now I'm clean, and I'm in NA, and my dad had just moved to town. He just got out of prison, and my dad got a little flat, and I armed my dad in my addiction more than I armed my mum. You know what I mean? I robbed him, I burgled his house, took money off him, I manipulated him, I made him feel bad, I blamed him because he was a rogue, and if he wasn't that kind of person, I wouldn't be an addict. And I carried that for years and years. And I only had to look at my old fella, and he'd feel guilty and give me anything I wanted. And I knew he felt guilty, so I'd do that. So when I'm clean, and my dad's, I ended up getting a flat by my dad, which is only a few minutes away. And I started to show up, and I started to go against the grain, really. Because we used to be mates, me and my dad. It was like a it was like grafting partners. It was like mates, you know what I mean? It was like a mate thing. And I started to show up, and then got these suggestions to go and tell him you love him. And I went in, and I'd watch a film, I'd have a cup of tea, we'd have a sandwich. And at the end of the film, I'd say, "I'm going to get off now, Dad." And he'd go, "All right, lad." And I'd say, "Good night, Dad." He'd go, "Good night, lad." And he's looking at me. And I said, "Dad." And he went, "What?" I said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And I kept trying to do it, and it was like, it was horrible. It was really, really uncomfortable. And I said, someone said, "Why can't you say it?" I said, "Because he's never said it to me." And he said, "Why would he? You've been a fucking nuisance since the age of 8. You're in recovery. Go and tell him you love him." First time I said it, he just went, "Good night, lad." And I come out, and I went, "This is fucking bullshit, this." "Fuck this off. You fucking tell him." I never said that, I thought it. And he said, "Go back and do it again." I went back again, and next thing he's up before he even said it, he's going, "Good night, lads." Cutting me right off. Anyway, there was a night where I walked. I was going to a convention, and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Dad, I'm going to miss you." He looked at my hand and I said, "What are you doing?" It's a bit close, and I went, "I'm going to miss you." And he went, "Have a good time," and turned his back. Hell. Come back on a Sunday night, and I knocked on his door, and he answered the door with this smile on his face, and he put his hand on me on the shoulder. He said, "I've missed you, son." And I got emotional, and I cried, and it was a lovely feeling. Because the lovely feeling that comes from it, that I knew that this worked then. So I started to be his son, started to show up and be there. And the next thing, he's putting his arms out to hug me before I've even said anything. And then we built this bond of like, I become his son. I actually let me dad become me dad, if you know what I mean. And it was lovely. Now I got to the amends of like, my man, and standing at a grave, and my sponsor said, "Write her a letter and read it out." And I read it out, and after I read the letter at the grave, I made a promise to myself that I was going to be there for my dad for his last breath. And my dad started getting a bit ill, and I remember Mark had 5 years at the time, and Mark shared in a meeting about the 5 years he'd had with his mum, and he had no regrets, and no guilt, and no remorse, because of the 5 years he put into the relationship with him being in recovery. And I thought, I hope he's telling the truth. It did. And then when my dad got ill, and I was there for his last breath, and he died in my arms, it was the truth. Because after 12 years of being his son, so I'm so grateful to Narcotics Anonymous. I really am. You know, I've got promised one thing, right? That was freedom from active addiction. I've lost the obsession to use. I know what the obsession is now because of the steps. I know that it'll come back if I don't keep doing this. I've seen it over the years, you know what I mean? That people who disconnect from recovery, they end up using drugs. And the relapse happens way before we pick up. I know that. I read literature every day. You have to speak to people daily. I've got a home group, like Mark said, which is my anchor, and I'm there every week. No matter what, I'm there. I need it. And speaking of Davey and Gavin, Gavin took me to my first convention years ago. And I went there, if I'm honest, because I had a drawer full of Subutex. I thought, I'll sell them to everyone in the convention. So I said to this, his name was Darren as well, I remember it, at the convention, the first convention, sorry, it was still part of the Northwest then, but it was the first convention I'd gone to when I was still using. And I said to this fella named Darren from Bournemouth, I said, are you a minute, mate? He said, yeah. I said, how long have you been coming? He said, so many years. And I said, here a minute. I said, I've got a load of subbies here. I said, £8 a tablet, but I'll do you the deal. I said, I'll give you them for like sixes. You know, on a parcel. I know what he's done. Put his hand on my shoulder and he said, keep coming back. So I thought, fuck you then. So then there was a jock there, some Scottish fella. And I said, here a minute, mate. You're the jock, aren't you? He says, aye, pal. I said, I've got a load of subbies there, you know. You've been coming along? A little bit of info. And he went, aye, pal, I've been coming for years. And I went, got a load of subbies there. And he put his hand on my shoulder and went, keep coming back, pal. And then I went into a meeting. And it was Carl. Carl R. Now, Carl's brother, Perry, was my old mate. He was one of my old mates who died years before. And Carl was sharing about Perry in that meeting at that convention. Carl said, he gave me this welcome, and I thought it was like a put down. And this is what he said. He said, I want to welcome someone who I thought was long dead. I thought he died years ago. Welcome to Narcotics Anonymous, Rocky. And I went, cheeky bastards. And I went to get up and leave the room. And someone grabbed hold of me and he went, no, that I said, making a cunt of me. Saying I should be long dead. And he went, and this is now a mate of mine sitting next to me. He said, you should be. He said, he's welcoming you there. It was in that meeting that I got me hope. You know what I mean? It was in that meeting that I got me hope. And Gavin took me to that convention, and I'm so grateful. And I didn't have a real close relationship with Gavin, but I was always thankful to him, and he was always a lovely fella. And he's done a lot of service in NA. And Davey, I was close to. And I want to mention Davey. Davey shared in my own group, 10 years clean, diagnosed with cancer, and he shared about his faith, and he shared about not being scared of dying, but just being scared of the pain. remember Davey crying on the phone to me about the medication he'd given, scared to think that people would think he's relapsed. You know what I mean? So I just want to mention Davey, and he's so missed, you know what I mean? But he died clean, like Mark said. You know, I'm a grateful member of NA, I really am. I'm honoured that I've been asked to speak here, you know. I see people, you know, running around doing service, seeing a woman with a bin, dragging the bin round before Trish. Is she in here? Throwing all the cups and the bottles and all the rubbish in the bins. I want to thank her for what she's doing. And Joe, just seen Joe, there he is. Joe's just doing service, he's standing at the front, greeting people, you know what I mean, welcoming people. You know, just keep doing it, mate, and you stay clean. Yeah, and at the moment, you know, I can't finish without saying that, yeah, I'm in recovery, I'm living life on life's terms, there's loads of struggles, I'm not suffering, I struggle, and I make mistakes. I'm not perfect, you know what I mean, and but I think the important thing is that I amend my mistakes, and I think that's why I'm still here. So at the moment, you know, it's the most difficult part of my life. What's happened to my partner's son who lives with us. He's paralysed. He's been in a coma. He's had 3 parts of his skull removed. He can't speak. He can't walk. He can move his hand. He's communicating through writing on a board. And all I want to say is this: that thank God for recovery. You know, that we're clean and we're there every single day. After work, we're there at the hospital. He's improving. You know what I mean? People are praying for him, and it's worked. It's worked. He's alive. He's lived through what the doctors said that he wouldn't. And he's slowly improving. You know what I mean? If I think back to, you know, when the most stupidest things that I'd used drugs on, the things that I'd create for the arguments, I'd use on. And it absolutely is a miracle that I'm clean. I just want to read this before I finish and express my gratitude for being asked to do this tonight. Whether it's sitting up here on this stage or whether it's in a meeting. So it's the parallel page to the Just for Today, what today, and it's about step 12 and about carrying the message. By this time, most of us realise that the only way we can keep what was given to us is by sharing this new gift of life with the still suffering addict. This is our best insurance against relapse, to the torturous existence of using. We call it carrying the message, and we do it in a number of ways. In the 12th step, we practice the spiritual principles of giving the NA message of recovery in order to keep it. Even if a member with a day in the NA fellowship, even a member with one day in the NA fellowship can carry the message that the program works. I want to thank NA, right, for giving me a new way of life. I was 16 years clean on Wednesday. And believe me when I say it, right, I have not done this on my own. And I'm under no illusion that I can leave NA and start running my life again. I need this program. So, on that, I want to welcome anyone. Well, I want to just say to any newcomers to just stay. Go to regular meetings. Get phone numbers. Use them. You're not going to get on with everyone. You know what I mean? But find a few that you can trust, that you can talk to. Get involved and take on a bit of service. That service will be your anchor. It'll get you to meetings, it'll get you connected, it'll keep you connected. Get clean. Do the steps. You can't do the steps without a sponsor. Find someone you can trust. So anyway, I'm so glad that's over. And I hope someone got something from what I said. And like I said in the beginning, if you didn't use the drugs I've just shared about, it doesn't matter. Just keep coming back and you'll hear your story in a different meeting. So thanks for listening, I'll leave it there.
The 2 more weeks left, so Lil from Liverpool, please come up and basically do recover.
I will go without drugs, no face to same dilemma. What's there left to do? The season is automated. To go on with the best we can. Better end sales and institutions and that. New ways find to live in the years gone by. Can't even see it behind us, but you know.
Very few addicts are found.
Very few addicts ever had this last choice. Very few addicts ever had this last choice. Very few addicts ever had this last choice. Those who are addicts today are more fortunate for the first time in man's entire history.
In man's entire history. It's right, Paul.
It's right, Paul. There we go, I'll start again.
It's right, lad.
When at the end of it all we find a way for normal function as a human being, either with or without drugs. We all face the same dilemma. What's there left to do? It seems to be this automated that go on as best we can to the bitter end of sales institutions or death. Find a new way to live. In years gone by, very few addicts ever had this last choice. Those who are addicted today are more fortunate. For the first time in men's entire history, a simple way has been proving itself in the lives of many addicts. It is available to us all. It's a simple spiritual knowledge program.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Lee. Paul, you can pick your birds glasses up there, mate. And the last name is just for today, and Kenny is very kindly going to read it for us.
Go on, Kenny.
Just for today, tell yourself, just for today, my thoughts will be on my recovery, living and enjoying life without the use of drugs. Just for today, I will have faith in someone in NA who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery. Just for today,